There was nothing the Metropolitan Police could have done to prevent the brutal murders of Nicole Smallman and Bibaa Henry in the summer of 2020. Today's report from the Independent Office for Police Conduct lays bare how the women's family and friends got such a raw service from the police when they reported the two missing and as their fears escalated. In fact, the IOPC discovered that for almost 12 hours through an entire night, the Met did nothing to locate either woman and ensure they were safe. Their mother, Mina Smallman's complaint to the IOPC went even further. The police did not take seriously the reports her daughters were missing because they looked at the address they lived at and thought it was a black woman living on a council estate, so they did not bother to attend.
No one was taking us seriously. There was no search put in place by police. Our phone calls were being disregarded. There was no action at all. Bibaa wasn't even on as a missing persons on the Sunday after we'd made calls on the Saturday. You know, it's shameful, it's shocking that there's nothing really is going to happen of any consequence other than they are going to put them through a rigorous training.
The evidence is stark. There were a catalogue of failures throughout the night. When attempts to ring the victims' mobiles failed, some officers made an assumption that the batteries were probably flat. Others merely accepted a suggestion that both women may have been sleeping off hangovers when the reality was so horrendously different. And requests for a unit to check on Nicole Smallman's flat went unanswered several times. After a 13-month inquiry, the IOPC has concluded the police service provided was unacceptable. However, there was no evidence to suggest this was due to discrimination.
Right from the very beginning, they knew they were looking for two women of colour. I'm trying to understand why they didn't follow procedure. What could the explanation be? And assertions that they're at a Black Lives Matter protest. There's notes and documents saying that the inspector who closed it said, he used words like chaotic celebration in the park. Where did he get the notion that it was chaotic? It was 10 people having a picnic.
So you still think there was a racist element?
I do.
To the failures?
I do.
That night?
I do.
Her daughters had spent the evening of June the 5th celebrating Bibaa's 46th birthday. When friends left, the sisters stayed, dancing with fairy lights under the midnight sky. They were stabbed to death by Daniel Hussein in the early hours of Saturday, who then hid their bodies in undergrowth. The worries surfaced when no one had seen or heard from them in the 19 hours since the party. They turned to police for help. The first call was at 8:58 p.m. on the night of Saturday the 6th of June 2020, and the last came the following lunchtime at 1:18 p.m. from Nicole's boyfriend to say he had found their bodies. So in 16 hours and 20 minutes, not one officer had visited the last sighting of the two women in Friant Country Park. In that time, there were more than a dozen calls from family and friends and numerous return calls by police.
They've admitted that there were mistakes. You know, okay, it may never have changed the ultimate outcome. However, we as a family would have been spared the additional anguish and torment. And my son, I called him my son, he calls me Mum. He was the one who found his soulmate and his sister. If the Met had have done their job, cared enough, we would have been spared all the additional phone calls, sleepless nights, worrying about where are they, you know, and now they want to say sorry.
Not a single officer or civilian member of staff will face a disciplinary hearing. But the overall conclusion is clear. Short of resources, lack of experienced senior officers, systems that didn't speak to each other, and confusion all resulted in nothing being done to locate Nicole or Bibaa that night. The Met point out the COVID pandemic had reduced capacity by almost 50% in that area of London, while the sisters were one of 16 missing persons reports being handled at that time. The Met refused an interview, but in a statement, Commissioner Cressida Dick said, "The way we responded to information that Nicole and Bibaa were missing that weekend was below the standard we should have achieved and compounded the distress felt by their loved ones. I am very sorry that the level of service we provided fell short." The Met says it will apologise to the family.
The time for apologies have long gone. Long gone. Long gone. I met with Cressida Dick. She was very nice, very charming, but her job was essentially to protect the brand.
IOPC Director Sal Naseem said in a statement, "It is vital that the force addresses these shortcomings and effects long-lasting change and improvement to help restore public confidence in the MPS." This is by no means the only IOPC inquiry into matters surrounding the sisters' murders case. There are 4 others, all looking at alleged misconduct among Metropolitan Police officers.
Simon Izzo with that exclusive report. And we're joined now by Dal Babu, a former Chief Superintendent at the Metropolitan Police. Dal Babu, thanks for coming on the programme again. Do you agree with Mina Smallman, the mother of the 2 who were murdered, that the delay in trying to find their bodies and trying to deal with this missing persons operation was down to racism in the police force?
Well, Matt, I'd just like to extend my sympathies to the family. This is an appalling and shocking case. And yes, I do think race played a significant part in the way that this matter was dealt with. Quite frankly, Bibaa was a social worker at Harrow, really, really well-performing children's services when I was a borough commander. She was an exceptional individual, and from all accounts, from what I've heard about Nicole, her sister, she was equally a formidable woman. I think what we have here is a professional woman, 46 years old, no history of going missing, with several members of the family contacting the police saying that they are hugely concerned about somebody who hasn't gone missing, hasn't got a history, is a professional, is 46 years old. I do wonder what would have happened if that had been a white woman who had been reported missing. And I suspect there might have been a bit more zest amongst the officers to do something. For 12 hours, we didn't even have a proper search of the area. I mean, it is a catalogue of disasters.
And do you sympathise with Mina Smallman when she says the time for apologies is over?
Well, I think you have to respect the family. I mean, there have been a catalogue of disaster. There is no redeeming features about this whole entire case. And as Simon Israel says, there are a number of other matters that are outstanding. And I think what we need to be looking at is asking the question of why did the police not respond in the way that I would have done a risk assessment. I was in that position. I have some sympathy for the inspector. I was an inspector in Camden for 5 years, and I know how much pressure you're under when you're trying to deal with multiple challenges. But the alarm bell should have been ringing. You have a 46-year-old professional woman who has no history of going missing, who is reported missing by her loved ones. The police should have taken more action.
And how systemic is this problem? The problem of racism, as she called it, as you admitted, exists in the police force. And what can fix it?
Well, I think, I'm afraid, Matt, I'm old enough to remember the Scarman report almost 40 years ago. And since then, we've had Bulwark Farm reports, we've had the Lamia review, we've had the CRE report. There's a whole host of different reports. And I'm afraid what the police don't seem to be able to do is implement the recommendations. I don't think we need any more reports. We need implementation of recommendations. I would also like to say that actually we need to be looking at how missing persons is reported in the Metropolitan Police and beyond. Because when I was an inspector, we had a huge amount of resources. But since I've left the organisation, we've lost 20,000 police officers and 18,000 police staff. That has an impact, you know. And the inspector who's dealing with 16 mispers, you know, he or she can't do this all themselves. They need to have the resources, the police intelligence staff, in order to be able to do those things.
And just briefly and finally, if the police can't police itself, who can?
Well, I mean, this is the challenge we have: is that people are, you know, confidence is ebbing away. Trust walks towards you and disappears on the back of a horseback, and we have a real crisis in trust in policing at the moment. So we really need to be asking these questions and actually holding the police, holding the Home Office, holding ministers to account to make sure that we see some real meaningful change.